All right, so quick question. What happens when Canada builds a solar company in the sun-soaked chaos of Florida? You get Aspire Solar, a young, hungry team making real moves in a market known for sunshine and policy whiplash. Today, we talk with founder Luke Makar about building a clean energy business from the ground up, cutting through the noise, and earning trust one rooftop at a time. So welcome back to Off the Grid on the Record, the show where we go deep with founders and operators who are changing how we power the world. I'm your host, Yarek, and today's guest is someone I've been wanting to talk to for a while, not just because he's a Canadian like me, but because he's got a decades-long resume, but because he's in the thick of it right now. Luke Makar, the founder of Aspire Solar, a fast-moving people-first solar company based in Tampa Bay. Let's get into it. How you doing, Luke?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it,
Yeah,
Art.
you got it. Of course. No, I'm excited to jump into it. I kind of want to address first off, you're originally from Canada. I mean, you've lived across Toronto, Vancouver, now Florida, and you've jumped into one of the most competitive, arguably most competitive, policy, I guess, volatile solar markets in the country. Why solar, and why?
So why solar? It's funny you asked that. I've done a number of different jobs. First coming out of university, I wanted to be a lawyer. Uh, my dad was a
That me
general
too.
surgeon, so yeah, I grew up with a very privileged upbringing, and I know I wanted to be able to give my kids something similar. So I was sort of scanning, and I said, okay, lawyers make good money. I wrote my LSATs. I was all set to go. And I was looking for a part-time job, and I ended up going on a door-to-door interview. I was a young kid, I was hungry, and pretty quickly I started making money. And I'm like, why would I go through law school if I can just make money knocking doors? I wasn't thinking, can you do this for 10, 15, 20, 30 years? I said, I'll just be a businessman. And at some point, I ended up in the car industry because I thought, I'm tired of working 6 days a week. Ontario winters, if you're not familiar, they're
Yeah,
pretty harsh. We didn't
they
stop
can.
for winter. So I was like, I'd like to feel my hands, on a Saturday. So I got into the car industry thinking I'd build a portfolio. Uh, I just wasn't really fit for a desk. So I started thinking, if you reach the top of this ladder and you're really happy and you're really successful, what kind of life do you live? And said, let's say you own a couple dealerships, do you feel fulfilled? And I knew pretty quickly that the answer was no. So I started to work backwards. And I said, okay, well, what would give you that sort of fulfillment? I said, well, you've got to own a business. Working in the door-to-door industry was a small business, and you could see the hunger that these guys were working with who were building the company, and that was very inspirational to me. And you see how everybody pulled in one direction, even though it was a small company. And I thought I'd like to build something like that. I'd like to empower people to go and improve their living, and if it happens to be with the badge that I create, that's super cool. So I said, okay, own your own company, that's good. Now, what industry? And I've always wanted to work in something that I felt offered some benefit back to society. You can argue whether or not you think climate change is important, but the one thing that's not going to go away is hydro prices, or as they say down here, utility prices. You got to
Exactly.
quickly get rid of the word hydro unless you want to out yourself down here. They're not going away, and the stability of the infrastructure, definitely it comes into question. So you'd like to give people the ability to produce their own electricity, to store it, to not have to rely on, okay, well, what happens in the event of hurricanes? Or in Ontario, you guys just got hit with a huge ice storm. There are people without heat for multiple weeks, and you
Exactly.
can't really have that. So, okay, solar. And then it was the dog with a bone. I realized like, okay, this is what I want to do. I worked my butt off to get the papers and started working for a company. And every time I encountered an obstacle, it sort of tested that desire to go out and build a company. And there were lots of obstacles, and I refused to sort of
Give
to
up,
let it
give
be.
in.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%. So we made it here, and things are picking up. It's really exciting time. I mean, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I would argue that the federal tax credits, yeah, okay, it's super nice to have them, but I don't think solar's needs to be reliant on that. There's already so many benefits.
Exactly. That's the point I've been making, I think, for a while. I mean, I'm not in the thick of it. I'm in Canada and our market's completely different here, but the clients that I work with in the States, Everyone's kind of stressed out about it, and it makes sense, but I think now solar and the entire industry is on such like an upward trajectory that it's going to be really difficult to slow it down. Even with, I honestly don't even think they'll remove tax credits. The worst thing that they can do is maybe lower them, I think. But at that point, I don't think it's going to create as much of a ripple in the industry at all.
I've been reading, I think they want to introduce a phase out. I believe that the most recent passing of the Senate was 60% reduction in next year, and then I think it goes down to like a 20% from what it is now. So they want to phase it out, which makes sense. Just to cut all of a sudden, it's a little bit harsh. The other thing you consider is that there are a lot of industries that do continue to receive subsidies that are competing with solar. So it's not like no one receives some subsidies. But at the same time, you see just the value with batteries and storage and having some energy resiliency. This is what people, yeah, they want to save money, right? And of course, they can do so quicker when it comes to the tax credit, but just the ability to have power in the event of these uncertain, uh, say, natural disasters, it goes along a lot more than the 30%.
Exactly. That's what people buy into. It's the reliability, it's, the knowledge and the peace of mind that you're going to be okay no matter what's going on. You have like a backbone, you have something to lean back on. So that's amazing. I kind of want to touch on something like that as well because earlier, or I think I read something that, Aspire is still fresh in the market. What have been some of the real learning curves from launching in, Florida specifically?
Couple things. There's a lot of tile roofs, right?
Hmm.
We don't really have too many tile roofs. Maybe we have cedar if you're in the right place in Canada, which I don't even know how you'd properly flash that. But tile roofing and storage, as well as you're sort of seeing this home electrification, right? People want the chargers that work. Maybe they have reverse charging with the Ford F-150 can offer that now.
Yes.
Um, th- you see sort of innovations with the electrical panels. So these are sort of the things that it's not just panel grid tied. People say, okay,
Mm.
well, I want to save money. Great, it's grid tied system. But all of a sudden you start introducing, well, can I have load management? Right? Do I have the ability to change what's important to me when I'm without power and I want my batteries backed up? Can I monitor the system? What sort of monitoring do I have? So we see a lot of this kind of development, which just takes the scope of the project quite a it increases the scope of the project,
Mm.
which is good because it means that the whole house now becomes more independent and becomes more user friendly as opposed to just, yeah, you have solar, enjoy.
Exactly.
You don't have to look at anything. You're not gonna see it. Okay, you just don't touch it. Now you have the ability now to. I mean, you're paying for this. You'd like to be able to monitor the consumption or the production and see if there's any issues and you can track. Oh, this roof phase gets a lot. And I've had homeowners who've gone after the fact and maybe they clip a tree down and then they follow up on their production and they're like, oh, I'm getting an extra 20%. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. So you see homeowners start to be more engaged in their project, which is
It's a
which
great
is
way to
really
put
fun.
it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I guess kind of leading into that, on your site, you also say that Aspire's mission is not about, complicating the value proposition. It's, just good panels, fair pricing, clean installs. What does that actually look like in practice? Especially when the solar space is full of, I guess, overpromising is the word I'm looking for. You don't have a lot of ingenuity, you don't have a lot of trust. So how does that kind of play out in your company?
Well, I very much believe that I like to present a product or present a proposal in the way I like to receive it. And I tend to be less filler. We don't need this extra stuff. Give me the stuff that's really important, right? Is the panel high quality? Okay, great. Why is it high quality? Because there's a high thermal coefficient. What does that mean? It's suited better for the Florida sun. Okay, wonderful. Does the panel degrade? Yes, at a very low rate because we picked a higher panel. So I'd like to know just simple things that homeowners have questions on. I don't like to, I have people, maybe they'll come and they'll give me a quote and they'll talk for so long about something that's like, maybe it's not super important. I want to know, is there going to be a problem after? Is it going to be fixed? Is it cost effective? And you don't have all these filler fees. Perfect example. You go to a car dealership, you're looking for a car. you can't even get the price. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at like, "Hey, what's the price of the car? What's" and they're like, "Well, here's the payment range." They don't even give you a payment. They say the payment could be from here to here. And there's a
It's
car,
true.
you have a price, so what's the interest rate? Like,
It
it
takes
should
you
be
30
pretty.
minutes to get to something.
Yeah, you have to go to a back room for 20 minutes. Like, this should be
Exactly.
pretty upfront. So I like to deliver that sort of, here's where your panels are going to go. Here's how much it costs. Here's how quickly it pays itself off, right? We keep that completely separate from the financing, because one thing the solar industry has in spades is complicated financing. They
Mhm.
have a high upfront cost. So maybe you pay an origination fee anywhere from 2 to 5 or 10%. You have leases, which can be really nasty. You have financing contracts that assume you put 30% of the tax credit down. And so they offer you that monthly payment at whatever, $300 a month. And if you don't put the 30% down, it jumps up to 400, 450. And maybe that was explained, maybe it wasn't, but it doesn't need to be complicated like that. It should just be,
Exactly.
here's the cost of your system. If you want to look at financing, we'll keep that completely separate. Here are your terms. Here's some ethical financing. The interest rate's high. It is what it is. But that's what your payment would be. But let's not confuse this from, here's what you're going to pay for the car. So that is that's core to all of our conversations with our customers. The other thing we see is overpromising in battery capability.
Mm.
And maybe the manufacturers have a little bit to do with this. They want to put out a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery system and say, now whole home battery. And you're like, which whole home? There are lots of homes. Which is the whole home are we talking about for whole home here? Because I don't need to over engineer a system, but let's be honest, if your bill is $200, $300 a month and you put one 13.5 kilowatt hour battery, you're looking at a dedicated loads panel. You're going to need to pick some stuff. But if I just want to make a quick sale to you, Yark, and I say, oh, it's whole home, and I set you up, in 3 months' time, you're going to be very upset. So making sure the customers have all the information they need, making sure that it's easy to access that information. You know, at the mistake, we put some sample pricing on our website. You know, you know as well as I do, pricing changes so fast, right? Maybe
Time.
that's a mistake. That's just the level of transparency we want to work with. You can see very
Exactly.
clearly, here's an example.
Hmm.
And I feel it's working. And
That's
if it doesn't
amazing.
work, I'll die on that hill. I'm okay with that. That's fine.
Well, it's got to be working. I mean, you've got reviews where people mention how honest and straightforward you are. No upsells, no nonsense. Everything is, like really straight to the point. They know exactly what they're getting into. And I'm not sure if it's how the system and, how your company's structured, but how do you train that into your team culture?
I mean, you have to lead by example. Right. It just has to be the same way that I speak very clearly to the customers. I speak very clearly to anyone that will work with, anyone who works for us. Right. There's a level of communication, there's a level of accountability. So when you say, okay, I'm going to be here at X time, that's when you have to be there. And it sort of filters down um, throughout our whole process.
Exactly. No, that's huge. And I mean, what's been the most effective way for you to earn trust then, not only for yourself, but I guess through the team, especially as a new player kind of going up against, I almost want to say national names.
Yeah, 100%. We go up against a lot of bigger companies. I mean, it's just the space. And now, honestly, I don't think it does such a service to be a big national company the way they're dropping. I think it serves to be someone more local. It's definitely a conversation that I have with customers saying, yeah, everybody who's been in business 5, 10, 15, 20 years thinks they're going to be in business another 5, 10, 15, 20 more. I mean, just the simple fact is you can't promise tomorrow. What I can promise you is that for this project, here's what we're gonna do. So instead of a company that's been around for 7 years saying we'll give you a 30-year warranty, I mean,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I'm betting on, I'm not betting on you, but I'm knocking on wood for you. Like, I want you to be able to provide that stuff. It's just maybe it can happen. So we'll look at the basics, high quality engineered system, right? We pay a little bit more for engineers we feel are a cut above, just because that's kind of the basics of your system. High quality equipment, and then we'll pay a little bit more for installers. So we'll pay where we feel it really matters: the design of the system, the equipment itself, and the installation. And then we're not going to necessarily fund out tons of money to sponsor Facebook ads or or sponsor YouTube videos necessarily. Like, it's good to get content, but I got to do that stuff. That's where we need to be cost effective, because I want the
Exactly.
homeowner to just be super happy and call me and say that, this is the way that the project should be done.
Exactly. It
I'm
depends
probably
on,
a little
where
bit
you
of a,
put the money. Exactly. Yeah.
of course, yeah. I maybe got a little bit sidetracked there, Yarek. I don't know. You got to pull me back to center.
No worries. No, it's an interesting conversation. I'm happy to talk about it for a little bit before I jump back into the streamlined area. But you see a lot of companies now that, are just pumping out Facebook ads, but then you're limiting the quality of the work that, I mean, not even Facebook ads. I think that's a bad rep, but, pumping money into the wrong places, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that there is definitely a place for them. And I mean, I've come from it. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
my bread and butter. But there's definitely a time and a place. And I'll be honest with you, like a lot of my sales calls are telling people like, listen, I don't think you guys are ready for this yet. Because if you can bring in, an extra 30 leads a month, but you can't handle them, they're not happy, what does that do for your business? Yes, obviously, like it's a great way to obviously generate revenue, but it doesn't build you as a very good brand at all. And I think it's huge. And I think at a certain point, it's okay, but a lot of companies aren't at that level yet. So I think it's important to add that in there. I mean, let me know your thoughts on like how do you kind of see it in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, and it goes. It's everyday conversations. I was just on the phone with my supplier, and I'm like, okay, let's look at different roofing attachments. And I usually I start off by saying, like, if money was no object, right, what roofing attachment would you look at? And he'll tell me, and then we'll work backwards and say, like, okay, so what's your next best? And then is it the same but slightly cheaper? Or we'll figure that out. But that's where I start. I
Hmm.
start at, like, okay, how can I design the number one system and then work backwards? And homeowners, they don't care if it's K2 or Iron Ridge, or Unirac. They probably don't know. They're just
Exactly.
gonna look at the way you deliver, uh, when you speak to them, and they're gonna say, like, okay, yeah, I trust him. I had a guy with a big project, 28 kilowatt system, 12 Tesla batteries, on the
Wow.
water in Newport Richie. He just very high consumption. He wants it all backed up. And I looked, I said, listen, I'm like, there are gonna be some modifications to this design because we got to figure out, can we fit a couple more panels, or maybe we change some of the Powerwall 3s to expansion packs instead. And I said, so the pricing that you're seeing there is gonna fluctuate. And he looked at me and he's like, okay, either I trust you or I don't trust you, and just signed. And I'm like, okay, I don't know very many customers like that. It just goes to show that when you show up, and you deliver yourself in a right way, people are gonna assume that you take care of the rest of the stuff on the back end.
Exactly. That's wonderful. And it builds, I don't want to say aura, but it almost builds like a persona of trust. And yeah, that's what people respond to. No matter how you show up, what service you do, if you show up with the confidence and like not referrals, but like the past, the history, like the work that you've done before as, kind of your testimonial, I honestly don't think anything can go wrong. And those are obviously the best deals to sign, but the more the better you get at it, the more they happen, right? So
Yeah.
that's the best side of it. And Aspire offers, full service installs. Like we talked about, you guys do the battery storage, the permitting, the whole shebang. What's the most popular solution? Because you mentioned that there's like some different kinds of roofs and there's different kinds of storage, but what are Florida homeowners asking for right now?
So unequivocally, it's battery storage.
Yeah.
And no one asks for not no one. Let's say 15% of quotes that we're getting right now are not. They just say, like, I don't really care about storage. Um, just a guy last week, he's not interested in storage because he lives on the same grid as the emergency room. Like he's beside it. So he hasn't had a power outage in like, I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't need storage. You know, like the first place that's going back up is the hospital. So fair enough. But the majority of people are looking at some form of storage. And this is where I was saying this 3, 4 years ago. This is where the big changes are going to happen. You saw panel prices dropped, panel efficiencies went up, right? So overall, the panels now are making a lot of sense. Batteries are still very expensive. And how can I expand them? Enphase had their 5P battery. 5 kilowatts worth of storage. You need four to have a reasonable system. It becomes
Exactly.
very expensive. Now you have Franklin. They're making 15 kilowatt batteries. Obviously everybody loves the Tesla because it's 13 and a half inverter battery combo. So you just save yourself a bunch of costs there. But it's moving north. 13 and a half was a lot when Tesla came, and Franklin was like, okay, how about 15? And I'm sure it's just going to go up. And how can we make an inverter and a battery combo? And the Franklin being inverter agnostic is super friendly, super flexible. So this is where I see big changes. There's going to be different technologies that they're using in batteries. And them becoming more cost effective just means you're able to make these kind of microgrids within the home. Up until now, that's been the big problem. If you look at California, they have so much electricity being provided during the day, a huge surplus, and you got to feel bad for the utilities because they're not receiving any money. Actually, they're they're giving credits back to these people, and then at night, all of a sudden, the sun goes down. All these people don't have batteries, and they have to be able to provide an insane population with a very high amount of electricity within a moment's notice, and
Hmm.
then they've given people the credit for the afternoon. So this is a huge struggle. So um battery storage is the big one, and I'm really excited to see what happens in that space. Also, I think that utility scale batteries would be very useful,
Hmm.
especially in Florida. You deal with a lot of communities. Everything is community here. It's gated here, gated there. There's no, I mean, unless you're in the cities, it's not like, okay, there's streets. No, it's a highway, and then you find yourself in a community, and that's your town. That's where you live. So some forms of storage that would function within that, I can see huge developments coming in.
That's amazing. Everyone's heard some ideas of these communities investing in, I, I don't know if the right word is having their own grid, but they have their own storage where they have like massive sets of batteries, like somewhere tucked away, and all the homes have solar on them. And then, that's it just feeds into the system. And then whenever they need the extra battery or the extra power, sorry, they all pull from the same thing. And you've got, 20, 30 homes in these communities that are all, hooked up under the same system. I'm just curious, have you guys heard or have any projects about something like that?
I mean, I know that I believe Tesla developing a lot of utility scale batteries, and it just makes sense. It stabilizes the grid a lot more. It takes a lot of pressure off the utility to be able to sort of spawn out. And you have these sort of utility stations already. You can test out in smaller communities like we're talking about some larger form of batteries. But I think again, the pricing needs to come down, and the technology needs to be a little bit stronger. We need to push from 15 years to a 20 year or a 25 year, and then it's a worthwhile investment. You say, okay, well, the battery system can last 25, the panels can last 25, the roof, depending on sort of roof you're putting, maybe 2025. So the payback makes it much more worth it. As it is right now, I mean, like that Powerwall 3, it's so cost effective. And if you're designing a new system, the payback is very quick. We're designing systems with paybacks as low as 7 years, 8 years with a battery. Yeah, just with a micro, sometimes you get down to 5 or 6. So it's a very fast payback. You can throw a battery in and say, even sometimes I've did one, there's 2 or 3 batteries for a larger system and pay back 8.5 years. I'm like, listen, you have two choices. You can sit and pay the utility bill, or you can have storage, right? For
Exactly.
10 to 15 years for less. So what choice are you looking at? Um,
Exactly.
that's that's a big development. I think it's gonna continue to happen in the residential space.
That's huge. And I mean, have you noticed a change in homeowner mindset over the past, year or two? Are they more educated, like more skeptical, more curious, anything like that?
There's a lot of misconceptions, especially in Florida. Whenever there's opportunity, people are going to flock with maybe not so great motives, and you see a lot of it. I just admitted I've done a lot of door-to-door work. I think it's wonderful for anybody who wants to sharpen up on their sales skills and their determination, their grit. You do have to kind of have the right mindset to continue going knocking on doors. But solar has a ton of, they sort of split it up. So they'll say, okay, here's your installation company, and then here's your sales or your marketing team. The sales or marketing team will get what's called like a red line. So let's say they have a bottom price from an installer. So we can install this panel at $1. Whatever they sell above and beyond that, they keep as a commission. So let's say it's a 10 kilowatt system and say they charge $30,000, they'll take 20 of that in a commission. So
Wow.
they don't really have the greatest reason to be very honest and transparent, because like 20 grand, I mean, that's so
Exactly.
one a month, that's $240,000 a year. You can live a pretty nice life. So misconceptions we see, number one is going to be with insurance, right? The homeowners in Florida, they have a lot of questions on what happens with my insurance. Now, insurance doesn't necessarily go up. The only thing you'd want to check is, in the event of some damage, is my solar covered? So
Hmm.
if I spend $80,000 on a kitchen renovation and it's flooded and all the cabinets are destroyed and I need to redo everything, if I haven't told my insurance company, hey, you need to increase the value of my home by 80 grand, they're just going to bring it back to that original state. So you're going to be
Hmm.
kind of upset. So in the same way, you can go and say, hey, I've put whatever, 20, 30, $40,000 worth of solar on my roof. Can you increase the value of my home? In that event of damage, I can have those reinstalled back. Maybe that
Hmm.
increases your premium 10, 15, $20 a month, but your insurance company shouldn't drop you. And if they do drop you, that is a perfect opportunity to shop for better rates.
Yeah.
There are so many different companies. I mean, and this is where having a good network, good local network being established with, let's say, insurance broker, someone that you trust who's not attached just to one insurance company, can be really helpful. They can help shop your rates. And actually, I was able to get cheaper insurance than I was paying previously with coverage on my solar.
Wow.
So this idea that, oh, you can't get insurance when you have solar panels, it's actually the opposite. I got cheaper insurance and I have my solar covered. You just have to be willing to dig a little bit.
Fair
So
enough.
insurance is a big misconception. What's another big misconception?
Well, in terms of friction, then I don't want to,
Sure.
keep you hung up on like misconceptions then. But what's the hardest part of, running Aspire Solar right now? The part that doesn't necessarily show up on Instagram or, all of your socials. Some of the things that you might have problems with that you overcame, just to really speak to, you know, that you are like a viable power to be reckoned with in the industry.
Sure. With any business, the most important or the number one driving factor behind the success of a business is going to be sales. Right? You have to be able to deliver on those sales, but if you don't have sales, you have nothing to deliver on. And above and beyond, like if you take one step further, in order to get sales, you need what? You need leads. You need people
Exactly.
who are interested. So there's several different ways to go about lead acquisition. We've talked about some of them, right? Maybe you can make some posts. Maybe you can send someone door knocking. Maybe you can network. Now, each of these will have a different timeline. Depending on how
Mm,
much money you have in your business to stay afloat, you can maybe say, well, I can afford to network and have it take 2, 3, or 4 years to build good relationships with contractors or realtors or electricians, right? Or roofers, but maybe you don't have that much time. So I think having a combination of strategies as to how you're going to go about generating leads is was our number one issue. In the meantime, you definitely have to have kind of a building of accreditation. So maybe you go and you reach out to the Better Business Bureau, right? And you get accredited with them. Maybe you take the time to go and get Tesla certified and Face certified, right? You're slowly building your certifications so that the next time it comes up, say, okay, by the way, we're also this, we're also that, we're also this.
mm,
And that never really stops. You keep pushing for more reviews. That's social
exactly.
accreditation, right? Um, So Energy Sage. I got to give a shout out to Energy Sage. It's a wonderful platform. If you're shopping for solar, this is huge. They have so much good information for homeowners, all about tax credits, and it's really non-biased stuff. So this has been a good help to us as well. I had to push to become a verified contractor on Energy Sage. And it's basically like you'll have different installers who will bid on your projects. Now, if you have a super high retail rate, not going to work. But you're seeing
Exactly.
homeowners get great prices from verified installers, and they get to see all the information in front of them without, being hammered with a number of sales calls.
Hmm.
So where are your leads coming from, right? And after that, obviously you have the important part of delivering a high quality project. Do you have, how have you verified your installation team, right? Have you seen their work? Have you worked for them before?
Exactly.
How many projects have you done? Are they late? Do they smoke at the job site? Do they play loud music at the job site? Do they
Exactly.
finish in 2 days when they say they do one? All of these questions affect, your future business. So we've done a good job of like I said, if it's worth a little bit more money, I'm super happy to pay for it if it means that the customer gets a better experience. And I think that that's working for us.
That's phenomenal. And apart from that, well, how else are you getting in front of people? Is it just using Energy Sage and, relying on referrals and like testimonials, or is there any other avenues that you guys are
It's a lot of
either
it,
investing in or looking to invest in?
yeah, it's a lot of networking and a very strategic networking. So I'm a member of a BNI, which is a huge networking organizations worldwide networking organization where one seat will fill each chapter, and I fill the solar seat. Now, I am very ambitious when it comes to reaching out to different roofers. So I'll reach out to, 3 or 4 roofers a week, go and meet with them and tell them, hey, if you run into somebody who has solar panels up on their roof and you need them removed, you have to have a solar contractor do it. Would love to help. Would love if you just consider us. And if you do that several weeks in a row, now you have 15 to 20 different roofers who,
Exactly.
anytime they run into a roof with panels, they think of you. You do a project from them, they see you do good work, and all of a sudden now they're like, okay, maybe I can refer him for solar as well. So
Exactly.
finding people who you can help. That's been our, you know, how can I offer some sort of service to you and make you look good? If you need to say,
Exactly.
hey, this guy's going to be here and I'm there and we take it off and then we put it back, no issues. No news is good news.
Exactly. That's great. And then looking ahead then, what's next for Aspire Solar in the next 6, 12, 18 months? Is it team growth, new services, you're expanding territory? What's kind of on the docket? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, so both of those, team growth and expanding territory. I want to keep all regional offices very streamlined. We're able to offer very attractive prices because we don't spend on stuff that I don't think we need to spend on, but we can be very lean. And I think that regional offices can afford to be like that. 3 to 4 sales guys, a project coordinator, someone who manages them, and let's say someone who does administration. I don't need much more than that. And then, you have their installation partners that you work with. So if we have someone in Tampa, I know Jacksonville has quite a strong need for solar installers. I picked Tampa because I liked both the solar prospects and the family living. I wanted a nice place to raise a family. Um, so expanding, yeah, team growth, yes. I think as well, we really like to invest in our people. So if it comes to any sort of education that we can do, the Renewable Energy Plus conference is happening in Las Vegas. Go and see the newest technology that's available. Go and see all the sort of different racking systems that you can put. Can you do the railless system? Maybe it takes a
Yeah,
little bit to get into, but it's going to be very useful once you can train your guys on it. So we don't stop pushing to find more efficient, more effective equipment, training, expansion, team growth, all the above. We're
exactly.
excited for the next few years.
That's phenomenal. Walker, where can people go to find out more information about Aspire, about you, anything about the business?
Yeah, so feel free to visit our website at www.aspiresolarenergy.com. We do put blogs So there are articles there that will talk about tax credits, that will talk about new equipment that's coming out. I even wrote a little article that solar is bipartisan. It is neither Democrat nor Republican, because if you live in the US, it's like a sports team down here. You wear those colors very brightly, and you hate anybody who doesn't wear the same colors as you. It's in Canada, it's a notch up from Canada. But conservatives and Republicans love to save money, right? That they're all about efficiencies, and Democrats typically are all about social justice, but so offering something back to society, and solar does both of those. So you can visit our website; that will have a lot of information, and also our Instagram at follow aspire solar. Put a lot of posts that have a similar kind of vibe, all informational. There's really not much sales pitch in them. We just want people to have as much high quality solar information as possible.
It's fantastic. Anyways, Luke, thank you so much. I love your vibe. I love the company you're going with. I can't wait to see what you guys have in store. This is going to be really, really exciting, and I'd love to have you back at some point too to see how you guys have grown and how everything has kind of changed. So this has been a great conversation. We don't always get to sit down with someone, kind of in the middle of building a company, and your insights are super real and honestly very, very refreshing. And you're Canadian, so it's close to home for me. But
Yeah, a bit of everywhere
uh,
in the world. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me,
exactly.
Eric. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to growing and coming back and sharing our updates.
It's fantastic. So thanks everyone for listening. From Toronto to Tampa, Luke Makar is proving that even in a crowded market, you can still win with clarity, honesty, and hustle. This has been Off the Grid on the Record. I'm your host, Yarek. Please don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone curious about starting their own solar journey, and we'll catch you guys next time.